With the backing of whom?
With the backing of CIA, of course. The organization you wanted to join back in the day, as I understand. We should thank God they didn't let you in. Although, it is a serious organization. I understand.
See, this was the little stuff that I was picking up on watching this interview with that Tucker. It was like a 2-hour plus long interview that he did. It was live to tape. I explained what that meant yesterday with Putin. Welcome back. Dana Loesch here with you, bottom of this first hour. That was a little catty because it's a battle of the wills. And immediately when you sit down, somebody like Putin is going to try to establish dominance in a girl way. Let me explain something here. So you have dude fighting and girl fighting. Now, I'm not talking about physical fighting. This is what a lot of guys don't understand. Your wife, your mother, your sister, your female friend may be in the middle of a cold war with another chick that y'all know and y'all are hanging out with, but you will never know. Because girls do that stuff on the sly. They are very, very, very good at that. Dudes won't even know. And they're good at it because they don't want guys to see. They don't want guys to think they're petty. So that doesn't rise to the surface. Guys just like blast each other and then they go have a beer after. Girls are not like that. Girls are more Machiavelli than Machiavelli when it comes to this stuff. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I think that this is applicable to certain people in intel and in government. And there are dudes, the best fighters, the best people in oppo, in politics, are the people who fight like chicks. And I don't mean that as a pejorative or as a way to diminish masculinity. I mean to describe the tactics. Underhanded, it doesn't rise to the top, and typically it's only noticeable by a few people. Sometimes it bubbles up a little bit. And they can be very catty. They can do this thing. There's a word for it that I can't even remember what it's called now, where it looks like you're giving someone a compliment, but it's not. And that's what Putin just did in this interview with Tucker. Because Tucker had asked him a question, well, what agencies do you think run the U.S. government? And he was asking him this, I think, to get an insight as to what Russians and Russia thinks, what they think, how the United States operates. Now, granted, Putin's going to exploit this and use it for propaganda purposes. Yes, but also please just have a little bit of, just be a little gracious. Tucker's not an idiot. I know that some people in some other commentators who aren't as successful think that he is, but he's not an idiot. And I thought it was interesting because in the beginning, he'd ask him a question and Putin wouldn't answer it. He would stop because Tucker was like, in the beginning, why is this relevant? Putin would say, well, get to that. And then he would finish his answer. This was a little catty jab at Tucker. Now, there were some people, again, these are the people who are like, wow, Putin looks so much stronger than our president. Wow, can you believe this? And that's what I don't like. I don't like these. I don't want to think you're idolizing a guy who's not entirely genuine about his Marxist sympathies. You're idolizing that next to, I don't care if it's somebody you didn't like or didn't vote for. It's still the leader of the United States of America. I am very vain about my country, my shining beacon on the hill. I'm very vain about it. But I don't view what Putin did as a position of strength. And maybe that's just because I know girl fight. I feel like Charlie Day. Well, I am an expert in bird law. Well, I am an expert in girl war. Maybe it's because I know this. He didn't have really anything to say there. He was trying to make Tucker feel uncomfortable and plant the seed of doubt in Tucker's ability to stand up to him and therefore delegitimize any strength that Tucker would bring to that interview. That was a personality. That was a psychological smear is what that was. And he did that. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And I figured because I think in the day, like in the very early on, like Tucker considered going into CIA. I mean, why would you need to go into the CIA if you're going into the media, But I digress. And ended up not. And I figured that Putin knew that. And I actually remarked when I started watching the interview, I'm like, how much you want to bet that he's going to try to bring this up the moment they start talking about intel? So I thought that was kind of interesting that he did that. And he's like, oh, thank goodness they didn't take you. Well, was that a compliment or was that a criticism? Thank goodness they didn't take you. Like, you're stupid enough to come here and interview me. That's what it sounded like. It sounded more of a criticism than a compliment, didn't it? That's what you're dealing with. This guy's an old KGB guy. When you go and and to Tucker's credit, he could have stopped there and argued with him. He didn't take the bait, though. That wasn't a sign of weakness. That was, no, he's going to stick on his point, and he'll needle him with another question later, which he did at the end because he was asking about that Evan Gershkowitz, who's in jail in Russia. He spent 15 minutes pressing him on that, which I thought was interesting because that was, I think that question and the way he put it directly, that was the first time that it was at the end of the interview, but Putin blinked. I will say he did that. Because you could hear it in his earpiece. Some of that kind of went over, and there was someone else in Russian that was speaking over the translator that was giving him like different info. It was very interesting. Oh, I watched very closely. But I wanted to go back to the point when he was giving this huge history lesson, and Tucker was sitting there very politely and just letting him go. And there were some people like, oh, Tucker's just getting railroaded. Putin's talking for 20 minutes. Tucker's just sitting there giving Tucker face. And then Putin gets into, and again, if you follow me on Substack, I put this up there, the screen grab of when he mentioned Catherine the Great, because Tucker made his Tucker smirk. And then he goes, well, how is any of this relevant? And Putin couldn't actually answer that question. He kept deflecting and going to something else. He never actually did answer that question. Now, I still think this is a foreign land dispute, and I don't care. You might get mad at me for it, but I don't care. I want my taxpayer dollars to stop it. I do also believe that it is the West that kept Ukraine in there a lot longer and kept them going a lot longer than previous. But Tucker made a good point for all the people who thought he was going to be some apologist for Putin. The question that he asked him was, well, how is any of this relevant? He asked him that 5 times. How is this relevant? How is this relevant to this? Where's the relevancy here? Putin couldn't answer it. Now, why did he ask that question? Because you can sit here and talk about the ethnic makeup of the Donbas region. You can sit here and talk about the ethnic makeup of Crimea. You can talk about the Tartars. You can talk about the defeat and reclamation of the area of Crimea from the Ottoman Turks. And I know the history of the area very well because I started getting in. I like World War II, and after Stalingrad, I started reading all about this. That's all irrelevant. Tucker was right. Why is it irrelevant? What are the borders now? That's the point. Doesn't matter what all the ethnicity, the ethnic division, and doesn't matter what, under, and I've said this before, they were makeshift borders that were created under the USSR so as to get more seats on the United Nations. That's why they had all these little Soviet republics underneath the USSR. They wanted to have more of a presence on at the United Nations. But that's irrelevant too, because what are the borders now? That was Tucker's point. Putin couldn't answer it. And there are people out there who walked into this interview with a preconceived notion. They were believing their own propaganda that Tucker wasn't going to ask tough questions and that he wasn't going to be able to stand up and question Putin like this. And Putin never answered that question. So you have to ask, who's guilty of falling for propaganda here? I watched that interview very, very closely. I'm not a fan of Putin. I hate commies. Better dead than red. I literally have it as a shirt. Thank you, Ramones. Better dead than red. But Tucker didn't fold during that interview, and then it ended awkwardly too. He pressed him about the reporter that was in custody, and that was the first time he blinked because he was a little off. Now, there are some people I think that are still mad over the primary, and they're mad over different primary lines, and I think that's going to, they're conditioned to immediately not want to like anything on this. But then you have people like this, like Michael Knowles. What the hell is this tweet? There's some people out here that I'm like, I can tell that some people are book smart, but not street smart. He comes out and says something like this, quote, "What's so shocking about the Putin interview is not his peerless brilliance, Putin's peerless brilliance. He's clearly an intelligent, impressive statesman. We used to have statesmen too. What changed is not that the Russians started to study history, it's that we stopped." My gosh, why don't you get like a better grip on the hips when you kiss the butt? That's one of the dumbest things that I've ever read. Peerless brilliance, man, you are a sucker for propaganda. That's so stupid. I mean, I'm retweeting it. Let's have a fight. I don't like this stuff. It's like, why would you say something like that? That's so stupid. Peerless brilliance, why? Because a guy who's been in government longer than I've been alive sits down in an interview, a KGB agent sits down in an interview, and I can sit here and regale you with American history too for 20 minutes without using notes. Why is that such a big deal to people? Seriously? You would have to have notes to just talk for 20 minutes about your country's history? That's dumb. That's your low bar of measure. I get it that some people are so thirsty for a leader in the United States and they desperately need like a shot of testosterone in the upper echelon of American representation. That ain't the way to do it, kids. Not the way to do it. I thought that the interview, I didn't think that he came off as peerless brilliance. He looked like a guy who was well rehearsed, but Tucker did throw him. Tucker didn't stop asking, and he's going to actually come on with us. He's traveling right now, but he's going to be coming on when he gets back stateside. But he, I thought, stayed right on the line of questioning. And he asked the questions that I think that we all would have asked to kind of get a general sort of more accurate surface area characterization of what the Kremlin thinks, how Americans are perceived, and how much is propaganda versus actual real thought, you know? And then he was thrown at the end. I thought it was a very insightful interview. But I don't think that there's any peerless brilliance of Vladimir Putin. I mean, if you think that, my gosh. Remove lips from butt, then continue.